What was the significance of Canada's treatment of enemy aliens during World War I? In 1914, there were many German, Austrian, Hungarian, and Ukrainian immigrants living in Canada. As the First World War started, there was a lot of suspicion in Canada that these immigrants from the enemy countries might be disloyal to Canada. They were labeled enemy aliens. The treatment of enemy aliens in World War I involved being incriminated, thought of as a threat to the country, and forced to go into internment camps as prisoners across the country. During World War I, there was a lot of propaganda against the Germans due to the war. Stories and rumors from overseas concerning war crimes and other atrocities were accepted by Canadians without questions. Enemy aliens in Canada were thought to be spies and a threat to the country. The Canadian citizens were afraid and demanded the government lock these enemies up. Riots in Victoria, Montreal, and Winnipeg targeted German-owned shops and businesses. The War Measures Act was a federal statute adopted by the Parliament in 1914 after the outbreak of World War I. It gave broad powers to the Canadian government to maintain security and order during the war. This act was formed on August 4, 1914, and it remained in effect until January 20, 1920. Under the act, immigrants from nations that were connected with Germany, Hungary, Austria, and Ukraine were no longer allowed to immigrate to Canada. Immigrants from these countries were classified as enemies under the act. These immigrants were not allowed to possess any firearms, leave the country without permission, read, write, or publish anything that it wasn't in either French or English. As a result of the fear and the War Measures Act, tens of thousands of German immigrants were forced to register with authorities and forced to abide by rules of conduct for the duration of the war. 8,579 German immigrants who failed to follow these rules were forced to go to internment camps against their will. This was done to remove their supposed threat as spies. The camps were mostly set up in the Canadian hinterland. The people living in these camps were forced to work on maintaining the camp with little pay, food, and clothes. They were denied access to newspapers written in their own language, and they were often mistreated by guards. 24 concentration camps were scattered across Canada. Overall, the propaganda against immigrants from enemy countries resulted in discrimination, fear from the public, and being interned as prisoners. Based on the information that I discovered, my opinion is that this treatment was unjust because most of the enemy aliens were not actually enemies of Canada, but rather just innocent men, women, and children from their countries.